Like all Australians right now, I feel scared and anxious about what's happening in our country. It's okay to feel scared. I'm not afraid to say I worry about my community of Perth, including my family, my friends, my neighbours, and what the world looks like for my son and for thousands of local kids once this is all over. But it's how we act on those feelings that matters most. We should act out of hope that we can get through this, not fear that drives selfishness and meaningless panic. You don't need to be a vaccine scientist to know that you can turn fear very effectively into purpose and compassion. And Australians are reminded afresh that we are citizens of the world and we are all in this together. In my electorate of Perth, at the very heart of it stands Block C of the Royal Perth Hospital, built in response to the Spanish flu. Today, Royal Perth Hospital is the heart of the testing for WA's response to the coronavirus. I want to say thank you to every health worker, from the catering staff that work in the basement of that beast of a hospital, to the cleaners who keep it clean and healthy, and to every medical professional. I also want to thank everyone for turning up to work to support their fellow Australians. Community and personal service workers, some 7,996 in the Perth electorate. Retail and sales staff, some 6,096 in the Perth electorate. Health workers, 3,183 in the Perth electorate. And at the last census stats, there were 3,147 hospitality workers, and I know that today there are not that many hospitality workers. It is a very tough day for those who work in some of those industries. I want to acknowledge the leadership of WA Premier Mark McGowan and the Deputy Premier Roger Cook, and indeed commend them for opening new coronavirus clinics in Armidale, Rockingham, Joondalup and Midland this week. They've been clear and compassionate in their communication, and they've put the interests of Western Australians, and therefore the interests of all Australians, first. I'm proud to be a West Australian voice in this parliament, but I acknowledge that there are fewer Western Australian voices in this parliament this week because of the limitations that we have had to go through. I thank the whips and I thank everyone who has made arrangements so that we can have some voices, but this is not a parliament of all voices, as it normally is. Yesterday, before flying to Canberra, I got coffee from Miller and Baker, one of hundreds of great cafes in Perth. They only opened their business in December. I said to the owners that we'd be passing some legislation to help their cash flow. Without missing a beat, they responded, "What about our casual staff?" That sort of compassion is what we need from every employer in the country right now. Today, businesses across my electorate and across every electorate in the country are closing. For me, it's the Court, Pika Bar, the Inglewood Hotel, our local, the Rosemount, just to name a few. But unlike Blockbuster Video, they are not closed forever. They will reopen. But for these businesses, for their staff, these are going to be the longest months of their life. Just a month ago, Perth was buzzing with the Fringe Festival. I'm now being flooded by emails from people who are saying, "What's next?" Even indeed saying, "I've lost my job, but what can I do to help?" This is the most uncertain of times for so many people. But I do want to particularly mention those in the creative and performing arts. I got an email from Paul in Mount Lawley, who works in the arts industry, who said he's been watching this very closely. The I Lost My Gig counter is now noting that some $280 million of work, 255,000 gig event cancellations and counting. So it is incredibly tough times. But we need everyone in this parliament to do their job and to do it well. In that spirit, every Australian needs the Prime Minister to do well now. I want him and his team to be incredibly successful in battling this virus. People's lives do rest on them making the right decision each day after day after day. And if we think about the lessons of our recent history of the global financial crisis, this parliament saw too much immature behaviour from too many members too often, and some of that carried on for too long, in my view. The government should reflect on the fortune they have to have someone like Anthony Albanese, the Leader of the Opposition, as the Opposition Leader at a time like this. A decent person, a true parliamentarian, someone who was Leader of the House during that global financial crisis and has shown today that Labor and he has learnt those lessons. Someone who knows that our work ultimately in this place is in the service of all Australians. A friend said to me this morning, and I'm going to steal his quote and half reference it, "We don't have a cure for this virus, but we do have the medicine of kindness, compassion and hope." I think that is a really smart way of summing up what we can and what we can't do right now. We have kindness, and in that spirit I'd like to thank some of those who teach kindness at the earliest years, the early childhood educators who work just as hard and are in just as difficult a position as our teachers and teachers' assistants. We have compassion. We know that racism will never be a sustainable economic strategy. And we have hope, because so many people in this place, and indeed Australians, all 25 million of them, have in some time in their lives overcome great personal crisis and come out stronger the other side. We are experiencing, as many have said, a health and an economic crisis. But sadly, natural disasters will not take a break while we battle the coronavirus. We've heard briefings that domestic violence will get worse, as will homelessness. And as the Leader of the Opposition said, it's pretty hard to self-isolate if you're homeless. I note that what the Mayor of London has done today is coordinate with the International Hotels Group to provide homes for some 300 homeless people in London. I think that was a very smart move and something that we should look at here in Australia. And we think globally there are thousands who cannot apply the social distancing and isolation that is required to contain this virus. My fear is that over time, over this year, we have a risk that this health and economic crisis becomes a democratic and international security crisis. We must maintain our belief in democracy. We must continue to practice democracy. If for just one day Australia sends a message to our neighbours across the world that democracy is optional, we will encourage a security crisis. We've seen warnings also on cybersecurity with these rapidly changing work arrangements. These are serious warnings too, and we need to keep our international institutions talking. It was the G20 that helped us through the global financial crisis. We now need the World Health Organization to be more successful than it has ever been in its history. When we return to a normal sitting schedule, I hope that some of the constructive tone of today remains. The members of this parliament must also come with a comprehensive plan for the recovery phase. We are going to be given a bit of time to think about that, with some of our other duties being lightened. So it's important that we actually have that comprehensive plan in place. How we rebuild to have thriving small businesses, return to a world full of joy, performing arts and culture, a normal education system. We will have no excuse. The hard thinking, long-term planning must be done now. If that involves new ideas, new ways of thinking, new ways of working together, we should do it, because that's the only way that we can rebuild a fairer and stronger community than the one we had before this horrible virus. Thank you.
I thank the honourable member for Perth. The question is that these bills be now read a second time.